He is a veteran principal. Doesn't look like it, does he? But he is a veteran principal, having come to us from Clark County, and we were very fortunate to have hired him. So this is a team that has an enormous task, because this is part of building the plane as you're flying it. Remember, the Common Core state standards are new across the nation, and we're all trying to figure this out and do it in a way that builds on the experience of our staffs while we're still challenging them and helping them to understand the shifts that are occurring. You're going to hear that word several times tonight. The shifts that are occurring in their teaching and the shifts that we are expecting for our learners. That's a lot of information. You're going to hear a lot of information tonight, and if you're like me, you're going to have to hear it several times. So we will be happy to come up and do this, refine this, to do what we need to help you understand the impact that it's going to have on your schools, K-12 up here. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. And thank you, Incline, for being here this evening with a little feedback. I have to back up here before I start, actually. I was raised on a farm in Kansas. So when I look at the bike, the first thing, you know where Kansas is, right? So the first thing I look at here is there might be an engineering issue. Anyone spot it? Thank you. So I'm thinking 2 sets of pedals, and how many seats? 5? So apparently the first 2 persons would be doing most of the work, right? Everyone else, their legs just hang off. I couldn't help but poke fun at Mary. But I like the diagram a lot. It does make a lot of sense. We actually built something similar to this in Washoe County with, this is, if you're familiar with the business world, the corporate structure, the PDSA or PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act model, continuous improvement model, always going forward. So I appreciate the diagram, but I'd probably take it back and work on the blueprints a little more. I am Scott Bailey, the Chief Academic Officer. I was Performance Director last year, so everything I learned from Nancy. If this goes bad tonight, that's who to talk to. I was intrigued to find that the price of admission was reasonable this evening. And I can just say that on behalf of my team, I hope we meet your expectations and that it was well worth the ticket price. So we are here to talk about the Common Core state standards. This is our agenda for this evening. I have a great team, as Nancy stated. Kendra Fox is here representing curriculum instruction. She'll go deeper into the Common Core state standards. Paul Richter will wrap it up with assessment like we do in an instructional cycle. You teach, then you assess. And I'll be basically providing you an overview about the Common Core state standards at a higher level. But before I do that, I wanted to go back and hook on to the State of Education address that Dr. Morrison's recently put forward. Many of you have already seen it, so I've exaggerated it a little bit to make it a little more interactive. Again, State of Education, it's part of our board reporting cycle every year. So basically Dr. Morrison and the board goes back and they revisit where we are in accordance with our strategic plan. We have some major highlights. Notice, Mary, I kept with the water theme. We have Nevada High School Principal of the Year. Dr. Morrison recently named the National Superintendent of the Year. Our board's been recognized. So the state of affairs, by all senses, would be favorable. Largely because a lot of our stakeholders a few years ago, I think there were about 17 committees. I was on one of those committees, got together and looked at what we knew about the future, what we knew that we would most likely be encountering with changes in legislation, changes in standards and so forth. This document came forward to focus everyone on a central vision and mission. So pretty much everything we do, even on and I know my department folks here could attest to that, we measure our progress with KPIs, we talk about our key performance indicators on a frequent basis. Those things that keep us on that true north all comes from that document. That document consists of 5 major pillars. These are the strategic plan goals for the district. So you can see that there's an emphasis on academic success, which you would expect. We also have goals around personnel community partners, families, and thank you for all being here, especially if you don't have children in the district. That's admirable that you're here supporting us. The culture, that's an important concept that sometimes we don't address. And then lastly, the management systems, going back to that PDSA cycle, where we continually strive to improve, but not only do we say that, we actually measure our progress. So beneath each of these goals, these are some of the initiatives that we've put forth to ready ourselves as this so-called tsunami of change comes upon us. I won't bore you with reading this, you can read it yourself. But notice Common Core State Standards is one of those initiatives. Our state did sign on to be a part of the Common Core State Standards, as most other states did. Within the personnel realm, the teachers that are in the audience can attest to this, that world's changing a lot. It's going to be, it will consist of components of performance-based measures, somehow affiliated with achievement scores. It will also go back to that cultural concept, and I could best describe it like this, back to the bicycle. You've got 50% of the weight on a teacher's evaluation and a principal's evaluation will be based on qualitative data. So like your surveys of community, surveys of students, classroom walkthroughs that principals do. You've got the other bicycle wheel that will be heavy on quantitative. So that's actually looking at student achievement data. And then those two things meet in the middle, and the evaluation process basically lands there. Washoe Academy of School Leaders has gained a lot of attention lately. That's our administrator pipeline, and we plan to do that with other employee groups as well. So if you're an aspiring administrator, we get you in this training program. It lasts initially for 1 year with support ongoing, launching you into an assistant principalship or principalship. So we're really excited about that one too. Our communications department does an awesome job. They actually promote our success to the nth degree, receiving a lot of recognition. Our district's been recognized, as you know, for increases in graduation rates. We've reached out in the digital arena. Again, that engagement, keeping in touch with the community, things like YouTube and Twitter. We, as part of that cultural piece, surveyed students, and we found that we need to recognize the fact that some bullying does occur in the schools. So we have an aggressive campaign around bullying. And goal 5, back to the management aspect. In lean times, we know that we have to think differently and be creative and innovative of how we do things and how we use our funds. So we've really gone back and studied. We've used a Six Sigma and a Lean Six Sigma process, if you're familiar with that. So looking for ways to trim budget and divert budget. So if there are things that we've been doing and no one stopped to question why we're doing it that way, but we're spending resources and time on it, then we may collapse that and move it into something else that's of a higher importance, like Common Core State Standards, for example. Soon we will have live dashboards and scorecards here, so that you, just as if you're driving down the highway in your car, you're always monitoring your fuel gauge and how many miles per hour you're going. You'll be able to do the same digitally for all the schools and the district as a whole in the very near future. So these little gauges will show where we are in performance constantly. You can even look at your attendance rate on that gauge. So all those things have set us up, I think, for great success. As successful as we could be with this big wave coming upon us right now. Now, personally, I see the Common Core State Standards as a challenge, and I'm kind of excited about it. And I don't know how many surfers there are in here that surf Lake Tahoe, but if you were a surfer surfing Lake Tahoe on a windy day, that could be you. So what happens if that's you and you've got this big wave coming right behind you? Well, that's where all the action's taking place. It's kind of exciting, right? What's that? You move with it. You move with it, right? You want to be ahead of it, stay ahead of the curl. You don't want it to fall on you or collapse on you. But there's a whole lot of energy right there. With that amount of water coming behind you, a lot of energy, a lot of excitement. We are trying to capitalize on that challenge right now. So the tidal wave itself. These are some of the legislative actions that I was talking about earlier. ESEA, which is the Elementary Secondary Education Act, otherwise known as Nickel B or No Child Left Behind. It's undergoing a revision right now. Hopefully it gets through Congress sooner than later. But it has changed a lot of the landscape with which we travel in the education sector. We have school improvement grants from the federal government. Most of you know them as SIG schools. We have some SIG schools in Washoe County. And Common Core state standards, once again, you keep seeing a common theme here. And we also have an extended probation period back to the personnel. So, for example, if you're a new teacher or new to the probationary world, you're on probation 3 years now. And at any time, there can be some discussions about performance. So the accountability aspect has changed quite a bit in that arena as well. And the growth model. Right now, schools are ranked under No Child Left Behind in the current accountability system, whereas the school has to make a goal. And if your school misses it by one student in one subject area, then your school could be labeled as not adequate. So the new model, growth model, will actually award and recognize student growth on an individual level, which is pretty cool. So it's kind of an answer that we've been crying out for quite a while around No Child Left Behind. It's kind of a welcome relief that now we can monitor. And if you go to the State Department's website, NDE that is, Nevada Department of Education, you'll actually see the growth model available to you right now. We call it the dance of the bubbles. So each school is clustered into a blue bubble, and you can actually change the year-by-year calculations to see where that bubble goes in relationship to all the other schools in the district, in the state, and so forth. So it's kind of an interesting thing to do really late at night. If you've had too much coffee, you can't go to sleep, you can watch those bubbles. So I call this part drinking from the fire hose. I was trained in Baldrige, and when you go through the Baldrige training, they call it drinking from the fire hose. Again, illustrative of the tsunami. There's a whole bunch of information, a lot of change coming to us real fast. Hard to soak it all in real fast, but we are going to make it happen. And again, we're going to make it happen because we've structured ourselves for success through the strategic plan. So if you think about one way to look at this would be that it's going to happen to us. Someone's doing this to us. But we have a different take on it because of our strategic plan. We have a very reform-oriented board that's behind the strategic plan. So when these things come to us, we see how does it fit in what we currently do as a best practice within the district. So we constantly try to connect the dots so that people don't see these as competing or additional initiatives. Major budget challenges, as you know. It seems like we just get cut and get cut and get cut, and especially in Nevada, it seems like we get cut more because we technically don't have a large amount of revenue right now in the current system. So all those things said, we constantly have to go back and balance the budget. At the same time, this huge wave's coming upon us. So again, thinking differently. Arnie Duncan, the Secretary of Education, recently said that basically we might as well get used to this, and we call that the new normal, because we are going to continue to have some major challenges put forth in front of us, I should say. Fiscal year 14 is, or was, more concerning when we're really concerned about balancing our budget. Because as you know, even if our sales taxes and our real estate taxes start improving, we're always lagging behind that improvement. So it might look good, the indicators are good, but we're always a little behind that by the time we get the actual revenue into the school system. So this was looking horrific for 14, but recently the governor, as you know, announced that he was going to put forth a recommendation regarding the sunset tax. So if that goes forward, then that 80 million shortfall we could be facing as this wave comes down on us in 14 would be greatly reduced. It'd probably look about half that, actually. So that was welcome news. I think we're all probably doing that right now, doing more with less. But again, I'm not pessimistic, I'm more optimistic. It's exciting. So this graduation rate thing, when you look at it graphically, that's so cool to see that graduation rate take off in the county. You have more kids making it across the stage. As Mary alluded to, it'd be beautiful to have 100%, and we should have, honestly, 100% of kids walking across that stage. We've had great increases in our current assessments, CRT scores. Narrowed the gap in a lot of our subpopulations. So again, all signs are looking pretty good, even as this wave comes upon us. But the reality is, if you looked at our graduation rate for every 100 kids, that's how many kids get left behind. And when you actually look at it that way, it's like, wow, every child by name and face really comes to the forefront, because when I see that, I think, wow, that could be one of my kids. It could be anyone's kid, and really, we shouldn't have that happen where they're setting out as the rest of the group moves on. So that's what we would like to happen. Every child by name and face to graduation. So you have to think a little bit differently, doing more with less. I have this great illustration, and I'm sorry if you've already seen this one before. But when I was in Vegas, I was actually a principal 15 years in Vegas. Had a great experience, but that disruptive innovation thing came along, and I thought, wow, I should go challenge myself. So I had a great friend that was the vice chair of MGM Mirage, and I talked to him one day at lunch, and I said, is there any way I could gain employment at MGM, like on nights, weekends? He goes, yeah, I'll set up a meeting. You go through the whole department, meet every president. Okay, cool. So I did that, and I ended up picking entertainment. So entertainment then took me to the MGM Grand Garden Arena. If you've been there, it's a huge facility. But I learned so much there that I applied to a new school I was opening as a principal about safety and crowds and organization, improvement processes. Had a great time with that too. But one night, to illustrate my point about creativity, I was in the employee dining room, and lo and behold, and some would think this is a freak show, but the Cirque du Soleil performers came down to eat at 11 o'clock at night. So you're sitting here eating, you know, mind your own business, and all of a sudden these people in costumes start migrating around you, and you're like, okay, this is different. And then you start these conversations. So before long, I had asked them, I just said, I have no clue how you do that thing where you twist your body all around, and what's that all about? Is that tricky? Are you born that way? So that conversation took us to, I can show you how in a matter of minutes how to do a trick. It's like, go for it. So they taught me how I could actually poke my head through a circle that size without even messing up a hair on my head. Do you want to see me do it? Because I'm feeling kind of limber. See if I can do it. Okay, because you'll want to know this. This is called innovation. Okay, here's the circle. I won't break it, but I'm going to poke my head through it. Ready? Right? Thank you. So you too can try that at home. Thinking outside the box. Sometimes the answer is right in front of us, but we haven't looked at it in a different way. Traditional classroom, say. My great-grandmother was a school headmaster, and I was at one time, believe it or not, rural school. If you look at that picture, there's probably not a whole lot that's changed from there to there, right? Black and white and color. The teacher doesn't have to stoke the stove in the morning like my great-grandmother did. But for the most part, still the same arrangement, still sitting in a cube. We've kind of got to get out of this mindset. And I love this saying right here, preparing students for their future, not our past. Because we do tend to think about our past, how we were raised, what the grade card looked like, what the bell schedule was like. That's all different in this tsunami world right now. Great illustration again. I know you've all flown on an airline, and I know that the first thing you hear when you sit down and strap yourself in the seatbelt is phones off, right? Got to shut down, technology goes down, turn your phone off. This famous guy, right? So you all recognize that. This news article in a Chinese newspaper recently was challenging the fact, why don't we use phones? Because in China, especially with the innovations in technology, the airlines are having a hard time controlling the passengers. They constantly have to tell them to shut their phones off while in flight. So they're thinking of different ways they could actually allow cell phone usage. The FAA, if you know, just recently did a study where there's really no harmful effect apparently for using it. They have criticized that once you get past 10,000 feet, you could lose your signal. But other than that, you're starting to see these companies capitalize a little bit on your $5 fee for using the internet, so you know it's possible, right? So it's a different way of thinking. But that illustration is, if you're a kid, a student that is, that walks into a classroom every day, and you're used to being wired, as I am, you're used to being wired, that's your tool, that's how you relate, that's how they grew up. It's not our normal, it's becoming our normal, but they are wired as digital natives, obviously. So I think it's a great illustration that when we're standing in front of students when they come into school these days, we tell them to power down. We don't put them in a seatbelt, but we come close to it. Don't get out of your seat, and without permission, that kind of concept. So again, I think we need to think differently moving into the future, and this wave's going to push us that way. Arnie Duncan, once again, was talking about the fact that we need to catch up with the world because it's our kids that will be the leaders of tomorrow. Kind of like what he had to say there, that this needs to happen really fast. So in Washoe County, even in the midst of a budget shortfall, we know that this is the best thing to do for kids, so we're looking strongly at the one-to-one concept for computer technology, where students actually have devices that they can take to and from home, that they can take their assessments on in school. So the whole concept of a computer lab may dissolve. The whole concept of blended learning coming on in front of this wave, where students see brick and mortar buildings a little differently than what my great-grandmother saw with the students reporting to the classrooms. Might look more like that than what my great-grandmother saw. So I want to say that's getting your Gaga on. Gaga really thinks outside the box, right? So I think that's the mindset we need to enter these challenges with. So going into the future, you're starting to see a lot of schools and school districts become a little more virtual, a little more flexible, and an incline of all places with your professional athletics, your professional athletes, you probably see a little more flexibility than the norm does as well, because people are mobile. So it looks a little different with this new technology than it did back in our day. What's interesting, as we're preparing students for careers, we don't know technically what those careers will be because careers are ever changing and very fast are they changing. So a good friend of mine that's a vice president of a hospital near here was sharing with me that he constantly has some positions he can't fill, even though we have this huge unemployment rate. So further in the conversation, he said that I think it's medical coding, come to think of it. That's the position. Evidently, it's a real highly skilled area, and it's in great demand, but apparently we're not addressing the need to meet his demand. So that's kind of that signature school concept, where we're partnering with the local communities to fill those voids and make it healthier Nevada. Because he does national searches, I know this for a fact, and still has a hard time. So it's working with our community. What do you need out there in the job force? What is the forecast of jobs? What are these jobs going to be? So Common Core, in my opinion, is of such rigor that it actually allows us to put sharp tools in students' hands. Bad analogy, because you don't want to see them running with a sharp tool, right? But we put these tools in their hands. And they can take those tools into the new world, no matter what that world brings them. There's a lot of problem solving, creativity. Mary alluded to that with the 21st century skills. We want our kids to be successful no matter what confrontation they have with the future brings. So, great illustration out of the mouths of babes. It's always interesting to hear what students have to say. We hold students accountable largely for learning curriculum. The curriculum is really a tool that we use in bringing kids to proficiency around a standard. A standard is basically a platform. It's a starting point. We want them to at least to get to a common standard. So when you ask a student about Common Core state standards, would you expect them to be able to articulate what that means? No? So this is what this kid had to say about it.
you ever heard of Common Core state standards? What do you think they could be?
James? I don't have no idea.
Out of the mouths of babes. Now, I can say that was less than a year ago when we filmed that at Smithridge Elementary. But now, when I go back, and actually we have gone back to ask that kid what Common Core state standards are, and he was able to articulate, I'm riding a bicycle, because they're doing project-based learning. So they've come up with these units that embed all these Common Core state standards into real learning. It's not that set and get kind of stuff. It's let's think of a theme and do a project around it. It might be man's impact on the environment or his footprint on the environment. So they do mathematics in that they might weigh refuse from the school cafeteria each day with the target to reduce the amount of refuse. Lots of mathematics, lots of charts, graphs, presentations, all 21st century skills wrapped into that project-based learning unit. So even though that's how they started out with Common Core state standards or germs, and a lot of our teachers might think that right now too, and we're here trying to spread the germs. My illustration of Common Core state standards, I'm going to start bringing this down so Kendra can hook onto it from here. If you think back to my great-grandmother's day once again, those roads that went across the United States were pretty darn rough. Some actually ended quickly into fences and barbed wire. Some were muddy, some were rocky, some were decent. To illustrate that in current practice, or past practice at this point, these could represent standards in each state. Each state was allowed to have their own set of curriculum standards. And they were also allowed to determine as a state how many students met a threshold to be counted on the accountability component. So in other words, if you're in Nevada, you had to have 25 kids tested in order for it to be built into your profile. So if you were a school that's really small and you didn't have 25 kids tested in a grade level, and I was in one of those schools, then you were off the radar. So what this has done is brought us back to a more common element. And I can't remember, I want to say it was Arkansas. They had an in count of like 47. So you can see the discrepancies in standardization. So now we're bringing standardization back to play, that no matter where a kid goes across the United States, of those states that have adopted, which is almost all, you would expect the same level of rigor to be taught to those students. And not that you have a large transiency population, but if you did want to migrate to another state, it should be fairly seamless in the expectations. Here are the states that have not adopted, very few. So you could travel straight across the United States on a pretty smooth highway right now. Common expectations, common curriculum, almost common assessments. And I refer to this as the curriculum superhighway. So we're trying to merge our communities, our teachers, and our students onto this highway now, this common highway. And as you approach this on-ramping, we find that people are in different degrees of readiness. Some just don't want to face Common Core state standards. I'll just keep on doing what I've been doing. They're over here in the hybrid. Others are over here in the sports car. They're way out there taking seminars. I'm ready. Give it to me. I want my kids to do their best. They're in the, what is that, Turbo 911 Carrera. All kinds of signals out there. Some are mixed signals. Slow down, speed up, go this way, go that way. So in the Office of Academics, which I have the joy of overseeing, we have some great persons, two of them here tonight, that help us deliver a common message. We're developing common planning and implementation throughout the entire district so that we can all be on the same page with how we approach this. This is another illustration. Basically, this is our job here. I call this the zone of productive discomfort. So you've got this baseline. Now this is the really tricky part, so you'll understand and appreciate what educators are dealing with right now. You've got a baseline. These are the current Nevada standards right here. And as we're progressing up the scale on Common Core state standards, we're also being assessed and measured on the current assessment system. So teachers have 1 foot over here, and they have to make that work because kids are being assessed on that test that we've always been tested on right now, till about 2014, 15 area. I'm not going to use that analogy. And this over here is where we're trying to move at the same time, so that when we unhook from this bar, bam, we have to be ready. That's quite a challenge. In some cases, Montgomery County I was looking at recently, they've determined that there's at least a 2 to 3 grade level difference in current curriculum to what the Common Core brings them. So if you could imagine shifting your grades in an elementary school that much, that's pretty amazing. So it'd be like your first grader this year sitting in a 3rd or 4th grade classroom trying to learn all things 3rd and 4th grade. So that's quite a shift. We had this event, I understand there's some folks here from South Africa on campus today, which is kind of cool. And that took me to Adam Kahane's work, Solving Tough Problems, if you're familiar with that, story of Mount Fleur. So we had a whole bunch of educators in September get together, September 30th at UNR. And we talked about what Common Core is going to bring us, what 21st century learning is going to bring us. And we came up with 3 top needs that were really outstanding. It was time, technology, and give us a plan. So Kendra's been working with her group on the plan. We started out trying to make a 100-day plan. And I think it's grown into how long now?
2 years.
A 2-year plan. So it's a big plan. We know we have to get technology into kids' hands as a device for learning. And we know people need time. So we're trying to design conferences and workshops and so forth, even outside the school day on Saturdays, whatever it's going to take to make that happen. And yes, there is an app for that. And I have one. And it's a great way to influence and make friends in the coffee shop. Just show them your Common Core app. So I would like to bring up some wonderful talent. This is Kendra Fox. She is the director of